The fluorescent lights of Bellamy's bistro hummed their usual tired song, a constant buzz that had become white noise after 18 months of double shifts. My feet ached in the cheap non-slip shoes, the kind that left blisters no matter how many Band-Aids I layered on. The dinner rush was finally dying down, leaving behind the wreckage of half-eaten meals and lipstick-stained wine glasses that I'd have to clear before Marco, the manager, started his nightly tirade about efficiency. I moved through the dining room like a ghost, invisible to the well-dressed couples who never quite made eye contact. That was fine. I preferred it that way. Being invisible meant fewer questions, fewer opportunities for mistakes, fewer chances that someone would notice the fraying hem of my uniform or the way my hands trembled slightly when I carried heavy trays. Exhaustion had become my constant companion, etched into the dark circles under my eyes, and the hollow feeling in my chest that no amount of sleep could fix. The scent of garlic and rosemary still hung heavy in the air, mixing with expensive perfumes, and the faint trace of cigar smoke that clung to certain customers, despite the no-smoking policy. I was wiping down table 7 when the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted, subtle as a change in air pressure before a storm. The front door opened, and Marco materialized from nowhere, his spine straightening with an urgency I'd never seen before. 3 men entered first, their eyes scanning the room with the calculated precision of people trained to identify threats. They wore dark suits that probably cost more than my annual rent, their movements synchronized and purposeful. Security. High-level security. Then he walked in. I didn't mean to stare, but even from across the dimly lit restaurant, he commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with his height or the obvious quality of his charcoal suit. It was something else, something primal that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Power radiated from him like heat from asphalt in summer, invisible, but undeniable. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and when his eyes swept the room, I instinctively looked down, suddenly very interested in the water spots on my tray. Marco was already rushing over, his obsequious smile plastered on like a mask. "Mr. Castellano, what an honor. We have your private room ready, of course. Right this way, sir. Castellano." The name stirred something in the back of my mind. Fragments of overheard conversations between other servers, whispered warnings about certain customers who should never be kept waiting, never be questioned, never be looked at too directly. My hands tightened on the tray. I watched from my peripheral vision as Marco led the group toward the back of the restaurant, to the private dining room that was only open for VIPs. The kind of VIPs who made reservations through phone calls that Marco took in his office with the door locked. One of the security men held a small hand, a child's hand, and I caught a glimpse of a boy, maybe 7 or 8, with dark curly hair and a Spider-Man backpack clutched against his chest. Then they disappeared behind the frosted glass doors, and the restaurant seemed to exhale collectively. "Table 12 needs their check," Sandra hissed as she rushed past me, her own tray loaded with desserts for a birthday party in the corner, "and you're up for the next table that walks in." I nodded, forcing my feet to move, forcing my mind back to the routine. Bills to pay, rent due in 3 days, the electric company's final notice sitting on my kitchen counter. I couldn't afford to be distracted by dangerous men in expensive suits, no matter how they made the air feel electric. 20 minutes later, I was refilling water glasses near the private room when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the refined atmosphere of Bellamy's bistro. A high-pitched keening, rhythmic and distressed, followed by a crash that made several nearby diners look up from their meals. Marco appeared instantly, his face flushed. "Handle table 4, he snapped at me before smoothing his features and slipping through the frosted glass doors. But I had frozen in place, my body responding to that sound before my brain could catch up. I knew that sound. God, I knew it intimately. Had heard variations of it 1,000 times in my childhood home, in therapy waiting rooms, in the special education classroom where I'd spent my volunteer hours during college before everything fell apart. Another crash. The murmur of deep voices, one commanding and tight with a control that sounded like it was fraying at the edges. Then that keening again, and underneath it, barely audible, a voice counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My feet moved on their own, carrying me toward those frosted glass doors, even as every logical part of my brain screamed at me to stop, to mind my own business, to remember that I was barely holding on to this job as it was. I pushed through the doors. The private room was chaos contained within expensive walls. Chairs were overturned. A plate lay shattered on the hardwood floor, and under the large dining table, I could see the small figure curled into a ball, his hands pressed over his ears, rocking back and forth. The Spider-Man backpack lay abandoned a few feet away. Marco stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing uselessly. The security men looked at each other uncertainly, clearly trained for physical threats, but completely unprepared for this. And then there was Castellano. He knelt beside the table, his voice low and urgent, trying to coax his son out. "Luca, come on. You're safe. It's okay." But there was something sharp in his tone, something that spoke of fear masquerading as authority. His knuckles were white where they gripped the edge of the table, and up close, I could see the tension in every line of his body. A man accustomed to control facing something that couldn't be controlled with money or power or threats. The boy, Luca, continued rocking, his counting growing faster, more desperate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Sir, I'm so sorry. Let me call," Marco started, but I was already moving. I set my tray down carefully, the sound deliberately soft, and lowered myself to the floor a few feet from the table. Not too close. Never too close during a meltdown. The expensive hardwood was cold against my knees through my thin uniform. "Hey," I said quietly, not looking directly at Luca, keeping my voice steady and low. 5 is a good number. My favorite number is 7. Prime numbers are the best, don't you think? The counting hitched, just slightly. I kept my gaze on the floor, tracing the grain of the wood with my finger. I like to count by 7s when things get too loud. 7, 14, 21, 28. "Want to try with me?" "Miss, you can't—" Marco's voice came from behind me, strangled and horrified, but someone must have stopped him because he went silent. Under the table, Luca's hand slowly lowered from his ears. I could feel multiple sets of eyes boring into my back, Marco's panic, the security guard's confusion, and something else. Something intense and calculating that I knew without looking belonged to Castellano. But I kept my focus on the boy, on the small fingers that were now visible, stimming against his legs in a pattern I recognized. "The restaurant's pretty loud tonight," I continued conversationally, still not looking at him directly. "All those people talking at once. It's like when you have 100 browser tabs open and they're all playing different sounds. Makes my brain feel fuzzy too." A tiny voice emerged from under the table. "Like static?" "Yeah." I smiled at the floor. "Exactly like static. Everything mixing together until it's just noise." "I hate noise," Luca whispered. "Me too," I admitted. "That's why I count. Or sometimes I trace patterns. Do you like patterns?" There was a long pause, and then slowly, so slowly, a small hand reached out from under the table. His fingers moved in a specific sequence, tapping against the floor. 1 tap, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. "Fibonacci sequence," I said softly, recognizing it immediately. "That's a really cool pattern." For the first time since I'd entered the room, I felt the shift in energy behind me, the dangerous stillness of predators reassessing a situation. But I couldn't think about that. Couldn't let myself acknowledge what I was doing or who I was doing it in front of. "Do you want to see something cool?" I asked Luca, keeping my voice gentle. "There's a corner over there, by the window. It's quieter, and I have a pen in my pocket. We could draw patterns while your dad finishes his meeting." I held my breath, waiting. This was the crucial moment, the point where trust either formed or shattered. "Will the light stay on?" Luca's voice was small, fragile. "Yes. Light stay on. Promise." Another pause, and then movement. Luca crawled out from under the table, his curly hair disheveled, his eyes avoiding everyone in the room. He was wearing a Star Wars t-shirt and jeans with holes in the knees, so different from the formal atmosphere of the restaurant. His face was tear-streaked, but his breathing was starting to even out. I stood slowly, keeping my movements predictable, and reached into my pocket for the pen I always carried. "Come on, let's sit in that corner right there." Luca looked up, not at me, but past me, seeking permission from someone. I felt more than saw Castellano nod, and then the boy's small hand slipped into mine. His skin was warm, his grip tight with residual anxiety. I led him to the corner by the window, far from the door and the noise of the main dining room, and we sat down on the floor. I started drawing spirals on a napkin, simple, repetitive patterns that I knew could be soothing. Behind us, I heard Marco's strangled whisper, "Sir, I apologize profusely for my employee's behavior. Leave us." Castellano's voice cut through the room like a blade, quiet but absolute. Footsteps retreated. The door closed softly, and then there was silence except for the sound of my pen scratching against paper and Luca's steadying breaths. I didn't look up when I heard the soft fall of expensive shoes on hardwood, when a presence lowered itself to the floor beside us. I could smell him now, sandalwood and something darker, like smoke and secrets. The scent made my pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with danger. "How did you know?" His voice was directly beside me now, low and controlled. But underneath the control was something raw, something almost desperate. I kept drawing, kept my eyes on the patterns. "My brother," I said simply. "He's autistic. High support needs. I grew up learning his language. Where is he now?" There was something careful in how he asked, as if the answer mattered more than small talk. "State facility," I whispered, my pen pausing for just a moment before continuing. I don't make enough to... I didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't. Beside me, Luca started humming softly, his fingers tracing the patterns I'd drawn. And beside him, I felt Castellano's gaze burning into the side of my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." The answer came out before I could stop it, before I could remember that invisible girls didn't give their names to dangerous men. "Elena," he repeated, and the way he said it, slow, deliberate, like he was tasting each syllable, made something in my chest tighten. "You've made a mistake tonight." My hand stilled on the napkin. Fear flooded my system, cold and sharp. But then he continued, his voice dropping even lower, intimate and terrifying in its quiet intensity. "You've let me see you, and now I can't look away. I should have run. Every instinct I'd honed over years of staying small, staying invisible, screamed at me to make an excuse and disappear back into the safety of anonymity." But Luca's hand found mine again, his fingers wrapping around my thumb in a grip that was both trusting and desperate, and I found myself frozen between the boy's need and the dangerous heat of his father's attention. "I should get back to work," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "My manager works for me now." Castellano's response was matter-of-fact, delivered with the casual certainty of someone who could reshape reality with a phone call. As of 5 minutes ago, I bought his silence and his cooperation. "You'll experience no consequences for this interruption." I finally looked at him then, really looked at him, and immediately wished I hadn't. Up close, he was devastating in a way that had nothing to do with conventional attractiveness and everything to do with presence. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, and they held mine with a focus that felt almost physical, like he was cataloging every detail of my face, memorizing the exact shade of my exhaustion. "I don't understand," I said. "You will." He reached into his jacket, and I flinched instinctively before hating myself for it. But he only pulled out a business card, black with silver embossing that caught the light. "My son has never let a stranger touch him. Ever." Most people trigger immediate meltdowns. His therapists have to work for months to build even minimal rapport. I looked down at Luca, who was now adding to my pattern drawings, his humming steady and content. He just needed someone who understood. Exactly. Castellano placed the card on the napkin between us, his fingers brushing mine for a fraction of a second, enough to send electricity racing up my arm. "Which is why you're going to come work for me." The laugh escaped before I could stop it, sharp and slightly hysterical. "I'm a waitress. I don't think I'm qualified for whatever you—" "I need someone who speaks my son's language," he interrupted. And for the first time, Something cracked in his controlled exterior. I need someone he trusts, someone who doesn't see him as broken or defective or a problem to be managed. The pain in those words was so raw it made my chest ache. I understood it intimately, the weight of loving someone the world couldn't see properly, of watching them struggle in a society that wasn't built for their needs. The nanny position pays $200,000 a year, he continued, and my entire world tilted on its axis. Full benefits, your own quarters in my home, and I'll personally ensure your brother is transferred to the best private facility in the state. Full care, cutting-edge therapies, anything he needs. I couldn't breathe. The number was incomprehensible, the offer too enormous to process. $200,000. My brother in a real facility, not the underfunded, overcrowded state home where I knew he was just surviving, not thriving. Why? The word came out strangled. You don't know me. I could be... dangerous? His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I know everything about you, Elena. Elena Rodriguez, 26 years old. Dropped out of Colombia 3 years ago when your parents died in a car accident. Took custody of your brother Miguel, 15, nonverbal autism. Couldn't afford private care. Lost your apartment. Put Miguel in state care 8 months ago because you couldn't manage both his needs and rent. You've been working 3 jobs trying to save enough to get him out. You're 2 months behind on your rent, about to be evicted. You have $943 in your bank account. Horror washed over me, cold and complete. How do you... I own this city's information, Elena. Every bite, every whisper, every secret. He leaned closer, and I could feel the heat of him, the barely contained danger that thrummed beneath his civilized veneer. I made 3 calls while you were drawing with my son. I know your shoe size and your favorite color and the fact that you cry yourself to sleep most nights because you feel like you failed your brother. Tears burned behind my eyes. The violation of it, the absolute stripping away of my privacy, should have made me furious, but underneath the horror was something else. The desperate, treacherous hope of someone drowning being thrown a rope. That's not fair, I whispered. No, he agreed, it's not. Nothing about power is fair, Elena. But I'm offering you a choice. Keep struggling. Keep drowning. Keep watching your brother deteriorate in a facility that sees him as a number. Or take my hand and let me fix everything. And what do you get? I forced myself to ask, even though I was terrified of the answer. His eyes darkened, and for a moment I saw something in them that made my breath catch. Hunger, possessiveness, something primal and terrifying. A chance, he said softly. A chance for my son to be happy, and maybe a chance for something else. Before I could process that loaded statement, Luca tugged on my hand. Are you staying? His voice was small but clear, his eyes finally meeting mine for a brief, precious second. Please stay. Everyone else is too loud. And there it was. The real trap. More effective than any threat or manipulation. A child's genuine need, offered with the kind of trust that was rare and precious and impossible to refuse. Can I think about it? I asked, hating how my voice shook. You have until tomorrow morning, Castellano said, standing with fluid grace and extending his hand to help me up. I took it without thinking, and the moment my palm touched his, I felt the calluses hidden beneath the expensive exterior. The evidence of violence that lurked under all that polish. A car will be at your apartment at 8 a.m. If you get in, you're mine. If you don't, you'll never see me again, and your life continues exactly as it is. He helped Luca to his feet, and one of the security guards appeared instantly with the Spider-Man backpack. Luca looked back at me, his expression hopeful in a way that shattered something in my chest. Think carefully, Elena, Castellano said, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. Because once you're mine, I don't let go. Of anything. Then they were gone, leaving me standing in the private dining room with a black business card and a world of impossible choices. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Marco avoided me entirely, his face pale and drawn, and the other servers gave me a wide berth, like I'd contracted something contagious. When I finally clocked out at midnight, there was an envelope waiting for me with my name on it. Inside was $5,000 in cash, and a note in bold, masculine handwriting. For tonight. So you can think clearly without worrying about rent. DC. I stood in the empty break room, staring at more money than I'd seen in years, and felt the walls of my carefully maintained life crumbling around me. My apartment was a studio in a building that should have been condemned years ago. The radiator clanked, the neighbors screamed at all hours, and there was a persistent smell of mildew that no amount of cleaning could eliminate, but it was mine, or had been until the eviction notice. I sat on my mattress, no bed frame, couldn't afford one, and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The facility where Miguel lived was 40 minutes away, but I called the night nurse anyway, needing to hear about him. "He's been asking for you," Nurse Patricia said gently. She was one of the good ones, the kind who actually cared, did the signs for sister during dinner, wouldn't eat his pudding. Guilt crashed over me, familiar and suffocating. "Tell him I'll visit this weekend. Tell him I love him." "I will, honey. You take care of yourself too." But I wasn't taking care of myself. I was barely surviving, held together by coffee and desperation, and the constant, gnawing fear that I'd failed the one person who needed me most. I looked at the black business card sitting on my windowsill, at the cash spread across my bed. Castellano's words echoed in my mind. "Once you're mine, I don't let go." What did that mean? What was I really agreeing to? I pulled out my ancient laptop and did what I should have done in the restaurant. I searched his name. Dominic Castellano. The results made my blood run cold. Alleged crime boss. Suspected in multiple cases but never charged. Connections to every level of city government. Rumors of violence. Of people who crossed him disappearing. Of an empire built on fear and money and blood. The articles used words like ruthless and untouchable and dangerous, but there were other articles too, buried deeper. Charity donations to autism research centers. Anonymous funding for special needs schools. $1 million grant to a therapy program that used service dogs for autistic children. And there, in a 3-year-old society page photo, I found them. Dominic Castellano with a woman. Blonde, beautiful, elegant in a way I could never be. The caption read, "Dominic Castellano and wife Gabriela at Children's Hospital Gala. Wife." He had a wife. I clicked through more images, my heart sinking with each one. Gabriela Castellano, née Romano. Daughter of another prominent family. The wedding had been the social event of the decade. They looked perfect together. Two beautiful people in a beautiful world that someone like me could never belong to. But there were no recent photos. The last one was dated 18 months ago. Gabriela leaving a courthouse, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses, her hand raised to block the cameras. The headline read, "Castellano divorce finalized. Wife Cide's irreconcilable differences." Deeper searching revealed the truth in bitter fragments. Gabriela had left when Luca was diagnosed. Couldn't handle having a defective child, according to anonymous sources. Wanted Dominic to institutionalize him. When he refused, she walked away, taking a massive settlement and never looking back. I closed my laptop, feeling sick. What kind of mother abandoned her child for being different? But I knew the answer. The same kind of people who stared at Miguel in restaurants, who suggested to my parents that he'd be better off somewhere else, who treated neurodivergence like a tragedy instead of a difference. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "I know you're researching me. That's smart. But the articles don't tell you what matters. I would burn this entire city down for my son. The question is, would you do the same for your brother, DC?" My hands trembled as I typed back. "How did you get my number?" The response was immediate. "I told you. I own everything, including, as of 20 minutes ago, your apartment building. Your landlord just accepted a very generous offer. Consider your eviction notice void, but the offer still stands. 8 a.m. Choose carefully." I threw my phone across the room, watching it bounce off the wall. He was everywhere, in everything, manipulating my life like I was a piece on a chessboard. It should have terrified me. It did terrify me, but underneath the terror was something else. Something that whispered about Miguel in a real facility, about never worrying about rent again, about a little boy who'd looked at me with hope in his eyes, and something darker, something I didn't want to acknowledge. The memory of Dominic's eyes on mine. The way his voice had dropped when he said, "Once you're mine." The dangerous thrill that had run through me despite every logical reason to run. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw two paths diverging. One led to continued struggle, to watching Miguel suffer in inadequate care, to the slow, grinding poverty that was killing me by inches. The other led into darkness, into the unknown, into the orbit of a man who'd already demonstrated he could unmake my world with a phone call. At 7:45, I stood by my window and watched a black SUV pull up to my building. It was sleek, expensive, and completely out of place on my decrepit street. The driver got out, one of the security men from last night, and leaned against the hood, checking his watch. 15 minutes. I had 15 minutes to decide the rest of my life. I looked around my apartment at the evidence of my failures, the empty refrigerator, the stack of medical bills I couldn't pay, the photo of Miguel on my makeshift nightstand, his smile bright and real in a rare moment of joy. I would burn this city down for my son. Wouldn't I do the same for my brother? At 7:58, I grabbed my backpack, stuffed it with the few belongings that mattered, and walked out of my apartment. I didn't look back. The security guard opened the SUV door as I approached. "Miss Rodriguez, Mr. Castellano is expecting you." I climbed in, and the door closed behind me with a finality that sounded like fate. The interior smelled like leather and money. There was a bottle of water waiting for me, and a folder on the seat. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a contract, employment agreement, salary, benefits, everything Dominic had promised in writing. And beneath it, transfer papers for Miguel to the Riverside Institute, the best autism care facility in the tri-state area, the place I'd researched obsessively but never dreamed of affording. At the bottom, a sticky note in that same bold handwriting. "Welcome home, Elena. We'll pick up Miguel this afternoon. DC." The SUV pulled away from the curb, carrying me away from everything I'd known and toward something terrifying and inevitable. I pressed my hand against the window, watching my old life disappear, and wondered if I'd just made the best decision of my life or signed away my soul. Either way, there was no going back now. The drive took 40 minutes through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, each one a stark reminder of how far I was traveling from my world into his. The security guard, he'd introduced himself as Marcus, maintained professional silence in the front seat, though I caught him glancing at me in the rearview mirror occasionally, his expression unreadable. We finally turned through iron gates that opened automatically, revealing a driveway lined with mature trees that seemed to exist in their own private autumn, leaves falling in shades of gold and crimson that looked almost artificial in their perfection. The house, no, the estate, rose before us like something from a dream, all stone and glass and angles that spoke of wealth so old it didn't need to announce itself. My stomach clenched. What was I doing here? I was a girl who'd eaten ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. I didn't belong in a place where the driveway probably cost more than every apartment I'd ever lived in combined. The SUV stopped at the front entrance, and Marcus opened my door. "Mr. Castellano is in his office. I'll take you to him." I followed him through double doors into a foyer that made my breath catch. Marble floors, a staircase that curved upward like something from a movie, and artwork on the walls that I suspected wasn't prints but originals. Everything was pristine, elegant, and utterly intimidating. Marcus led me down a hallway to a set of wooden doors, knocked twice, and pushed them open. "Miss Rodriguez, sir." Dominic's office was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked manicured gardens. He stood behind a massive desk, phone pressed to his ear, and when he saw me, something flashed in his eyes. Satisfaction, possession, triumph, before his expression smoothed into professional courtesy. "Handle it," he said into the phone, his voice carrying the kind of authority that expected immediate obedience. "I don't care what it costs. Make the problem disappear." He ended the call and set the phone down with deliberate care. "Elena, you came. You didn't leave me much choice," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's always a choice." He moved around the desk with that predatory grace I'd noticed last night, each step measured and purposeful. "You chose to get in the car. You chose to come inside. You're choosing to stand here right now instead of running. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell that intoxicating scent of sandalwood and danger. In the morning light streaming through the windows, I could see details I'd missed last night. The shadow of stubble along his jaw, the thin white scar above his left eyebrow. The way his shirt stretched across shoulders that spoke of physical power, kept carefully controlled. "Where's Luca?" I asked, needing to focus on why I was really here, not on the way my pulse quickened when he looked at me. "Speech therapy. He has appointments 3 times a week." Dominic's expression softened almost imperceptibly when he mentioned his son. "He'll be back at noon. I thought we could discuss expectations before then, and retrieve your brother." The casual way he said it, like collecting Miguel was equivalent to picking up dry cleaning, should have annoyed me. But instead, relief flooded through me so intensely it made me dizzy. "Thank you," I whispered. "For Miguel. For everything. I don't know how you'll repay me by taking care of my son." Dominic interrupted, his eyes darkening. "By being exactly what he needs. That's all I want, Elena. That's the only debt between us." But the way he said my name, the way his gaze lingered on my face, suggested there were other wants he wasn't voicing. The air between us felt charged, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with his reputation and everything to do with the pull I felt toward him, despite every warning bell in my head. "I should show you the house," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Your quarters, Luca's routine, the rules." "Rules? My world has dangers you can't imagine," he said bluntly. "Security protocols exist for a reason. You don't leave the property without Marcus or one of my other guards. You don't discuss anything you see or hear in this house with anyone outside it. You don't answer questions about me or my business. And you never, ever put my son in a situation where he could be used as leverage." The reminder of who he really was crashed over me. This wasn't just a wealthy man hiring a nanny. This was a crime boss bringing someone into his home, into his secrets, into his world of violence and danger. "What if I see something I shouldn't?" I asked quietly. "What if I learn something that makes me uncomfortable?" He moved closer, and I fought the urge to step back. "Then you come to me. Directly. Not the police, not a friend, not anyone else. Me. Because the moment you walked through those doors, Elena, you became mine to protect. And I protect what's mine with everything I have." "I'm not yours," I said. But my voice lacked conviction. His hand came up, and I froze as his fingers traced the line of my jaw with devastating gentleness. The touch sent electricity racing through my nervous system, every nerve ending suddenly hyper-aware of his proximity. "Not yet," he murmured. "But you will be. It's inevitable now. You just don't see it yet. I should have pulled away, should have established boundaries, but I stood there, transfixed, as his thumb brushed across my bottom lip with possessive certainty. The moment shattered when his phone buzzed. He stepped back smoothly, the professional mask sliding back into place as he checked the screen. "Your brother's facility just confirmed they're ready for the transfer. We should leave soon." The drive to the state facility was tense. Dominic sat beside me in the back of the SUV, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. He worked on a tablet, occasionally taking calls in Italian that sounded like they involved large sums of money and implied threats. I stared out the window and tried not to think about the fact that I was sitting next to someone who could probably have me killed with a phone call. When we pulled up to the facility, my throat tightened. The building was gray, institutional, with bars on some windows, and a chain-link fence that looked more prison than care center. I'd hated leaving Miguel here, had cried for 3 days straight, but I'd had no other option. "This is where you kept him?" Dominic's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made me flinch. "It was all I could afford," I said defensively. "I didn't have mob connections to buy my way into better options." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something like respect flicker in his eyes. "You did what you had to. I understand that better than you know. But he'll never see the inside of a place like this again. I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice surprised me. For a moment, the dangerous crime boss disappeared, and I saw only a father who understood what it meant to fight for a child the world didn't accommodate. Inside, the facility smelled like disinfectant and resignation, The staff knew me, greeted me with sympathetic smiles that made me want to scream. Nurse Patricia met us in the lobby, her eyebrows rising when she saw Dominic and his security detail. "Elena, honey, what's going on?" "I'm transferring Miguel," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "To Riverside Institute, today." Her eyes went wide. "Riverside? But the waiting list alone has been bypassed," Dominic said smoothly, stepping forward and extending his hand. "Dominic Castellano, I've made arrangements for Miguel's transfer and ongoing care, all expenses covered indefinitely." Patricia shook his hand like she was in a dream. "Mr. Castellano, of course. I'll get Miguel and his belongings." She disappeared down a corridor, and I paced the lobby, my hands shaking. I was about to see my brother for the first time in 2 weeks. 2 weeks I'd missed because I couldn't afford the bus fare, and the guilt had been eating me alive. "Elena," Dominic's voice was gentle. "Breathe." I hadn't realized I was hyperventilating until he said it. He moved closer, his hand settling on the small of my back. Warm, steady, grounding. "He's going to be overwhelmed by the change. You know that. Don't take it personally if he struggles with the transition." Of course he understood. He lived this reality every day with Luca. The reminder made something in my chest crack open. Then Miguel appeared, and nothing else mattered. He was thinner than I remembered, his Star Wars t-shirt hanging loose on his frame. His hair needed cutting, falling into his eyes. He was making his anxious sound. A low humming that meant he was stressed, and his hands flapped rhythmically at his sides. "Miguel," I breathed, moving toward him. His eyes found mine, and for a second, just a second, I saw recognition and joy before he started stimming harder, overwhelmed by the unexpected reunion. I knew better than to rush him, so I stopped a few feet away and signed, "Hi, brother, I missed you." His hand stilled, then moved in response. "Sister." Sad. "Why gone?" The question destroyed me. I signed back. "I'm sorry, but I'm here now, and we're going somewhere better, together." "Together?" His face transformed with hope that was almost painful to witness. "Together," I confirmed. Miguel moved then, closing the distance between us and pressing his forehead against my shoulder. His version of a hug, the most affection he could usually tolerate. I wrapped my arms around him carefully, tears streaming down my face. "We need to go," Patricia said softly, handing me a bag with Miguel's few possessions. "The Riverside representative is waiting to receive him. They're sending a specialized transport vehicle, should be here any minute." "He's riding with us," Dominic said, his tone brooking no argument. "In our vehicle, with his sister." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Dominic's expression made her nod quickly. "Of course. Whatever's best for Miguel." Getting Miguel into the SUV took patience. He didn't like new vehicles, didn't like changes to routine. But I signed through each step, and Dominic surprised me by crouching down to Miguel's level and speaking in the same calm, low voice I'd heard him use with Luca. "Miguel, my name is Dominic. Your sister is going to take care of my son, and I'm going to take care of you. We're family now. Okay?" Miguel's eyes flicked to Dominic's face for a fraction of a second, huge for him, before he nodded and climbed into the SUV. The drive to Riverside was surreal. Miguel sat between Dominic and me, his hand gripping mine tightly while he stared out the window. Dominic made several calls, including one to Riverside that made it clear Miguel was to receive the absolute best care, that any needs were to be met immediately, and that I was to have unlimited visitation rights. When we pulled up to Riverside, I almost cried again. It looked like a college campus, beautiful buildings surrounded by gardens and walking paths, with sensory-friendly outdoor spaces, and what looked like a therapy horse farm in the distance. "This is real," I whispered. "This is real," Dominic confirmed. "And he's already enrolled in their specialized programs: music therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, equine therapy, everything their team recommends." The intake process was smooth, professional, and nothing like the bureaucratic nightmare of the state facility. The staff actually seemed to care, spoke to Miguel directly instead of over his head, and understood his communication needs, without me having to explain. When it was time to leave him, I signed. "I'll visit in 2 days. I promise. You're safe here." Miguel signed back. "Love, sister. Love, brother," I responded, my vision blurring with tears. In the SUV on the way back to the estate, I finally broke down. Sobs tore from my chest, relief and grief and gratitude all tangled together in a mess of emotions I couldn't contain. I felt Dominic's arm wrap around my shoulders, pulling me against his chest. "He's going to thrive there," he murmured against my hair. "You saved him, Elena. You did the impossible." "You saved him," I corrected, my voice muffled against his shirt. "I couldn't have—" "We saved him," Dominic said firmly. "Together. The way we're going to save Luca, the way we're going to save each other." I should have questioned that last part. Should have pulled away from the embrace that felt far too intimate. But I was exhausted and emotionally raw, and for just a moment, I let myself lean into the dangerous warmth of a man who'd already proven he could reshape my world with a single decision. When we arrived back at the estate, Luca was home from therapy. The moment I walked through the door, he looked up from where he was lining up toy cars in a precise pattern, and his face lit up. "Elena!" He didn't run to me. Too much physical enthusiasm would overwhelm him, but he stood and moved closer with clear excitement. "You came back. Dad said you would, but I wasn't sure." "I promised I would," I said, crouching to his level, "and I keep my promises." "How was therapy?" "Loud," he said, making a face. "But Miss Jennifer let me use the noise-canceling headphones. Do you want to see my car pattern? It's based on the periodic table." "I'd love to see it." As Luca led me to his carefully arranged cars, explaining the logic behind each placement, I felt Dominic's eyes on me. When I glanced back, the intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. He was looking at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once, like I was a problem he intended to solve, and a mystery he wanted to unravel, like I was already his, and he was just waiting for me to realize it. And the terrifying part was, standing in his home, watching his son smile, feeling the ghost of his embrace still warming my skin, I wasn't sure I wanted to fight it anymore. The first week passed in a blur of routines and revelations. Luca's needs became my entire focus. His sensory sensitivities, his communication preferences, the specific ways he processed the world. He thrived on structure, so I built schedules around his therapies, his meals, his careful rituals that helped him feel safe. We spent hours in his sensory room, a space Dominic had designed with input from specialists, filled with weighted blankets, fidget toys, and adjustable lighting. But it was the small moments that mattered most. The way Luca's hand would find mine when we walked through the garden, how he'd started sitting closer to me during our afternoon reading sessions. The rare, precious eye contact when he was explaining something that excited him, usually space facts or prime number sequences. Dominic watched us constantly. I'd feel his presence before I saw him, standing in doorways, observing from his office window that overlooked the garden, appearing silently in the hallway outside Luca's room. He never interrupted, never interfered, but his attention was a physical weight I couldn't escape. At night, I'd retreat to my quarters, a suite that was larger than my entire old apartment, with a bedroom, sitting area, and bathroom that had heated floors and a tub big enough to swim in. But despite the luxury, I couldn't relax. I'd lie awake thinking about the conversations I'd overheard, the phone calls in Italian, the men who visited Dominic's office with hard eyes and harder reputations. I was living in a crime lord's house, sleeping under his roof, becoming entangled in his world with every passing day. On the 8th night, everything changed. I was in the kitchen at 11 p.m., making tea because sleep was impossible, when Dominic appeared. He wore dark slacks and a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with scars that spoke of violence. He looked exhausted, dangerous, and devastating all at once. "Can't sleep?" His voice was rough, like he'd been shouting or smoking or both. "Too quiet," I admitted. "I'm used to sirens and street noise. This silence is loud." He moved to the cabinet and pulled down a bottle of whiskey that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. Poured 2 glasses without asking if I wanted one. "Drink. It helps." I took the glass, our fingers brushing in the exchange. The whiskey burned going down, smooth and expensive, and nothing like the cheap vodka I'd split with roommates in college. Rough night? Business complications. He leaned against the counter, those predator eyes fixed on me. Nothing for you to worry about. Is someone going to die? The question escaped before I could stop it. His expression didn't change. Does it matter? I don't know, I said honestly. I feel like it should matter, like I should be horrified, but mostly I'm just numb to it. Is that wrong? It's survival. He took a long drink. You adapt to the world you're in or you break. You've been adapting your whole life, Elena. This is just a different battlefield. The understanding in his voice made something in my chest tighten. How do you do it? Balance being a father with being what you are. Carefully. He set his glass down and moved closer, until we were sharing the same breath, the same space. Luca is my purpose. Everything I do, every terrible choice I make, is to ensure he has the resources and protection he needs in a world that will always see him as different. As less. I'd burn down nations to keep him safe. And what about keeping yourself safe? I whispered. His hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. I haven't cared about my own safety in years. Not since Gabriella left. Not since I realized I was raising a beautiful, brilliant child alone in a world full of people who would use him against me. The vulnerability in his admission shocked me. This was the real man beneath the armor, a father terrified of failing his son, a leader who carried the weight of an empire, a human being desperate for someone who understood. You're not alone anymore, I said before I could overthink it. Luca has me now. I'll protect him too. Something fierce and possessive flared in Dominic's eyes. Say that again. I'll protect him. No, the other part, about me not being alone. My heart hammered against my ribs. You're not alone anymore. He closed the remaining distance between us, his other hand settling on my hip, pulling me flush against him. Elena, he breathed. My name a prayer and a curse. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is wrong. Tell me you don't feel this thing between us. But I couldn't. Because I did feel it. The magnetic pull that had been building since that first night in the restaurant. The way my body responded to his nearness. The way my thoughts drifted to him constantly despite every logical reason to maintain distance. I can't, I whispered. I should. But I can't. He kissed me then, and the world tilted on its axis. His mouth was demanding, possessive, claiming me with an intensity that should have scared me, but instead set my blood on fire. I kissed him back with equal desperation, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer as every boundary I'd tried to maintain shattered. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. You're mine, he said, the words absolute. From the moment you got in that car, you were mine. Tell me you understand. I understand, I breathed. Even though I wasn't sure I understood anything anymore except the feel of his hands on me and the taste of whiskey on his lips. Good. He kissed me again, slower this time, thorough and devastating, because I don't share, Elena, and I don't let go. Ever. The next morning, reality crashed back with the sound of my phone ringing at 6 a.m. I fumbled for it, disoriented, my lips still swollen from Dominic's kisses, my body still humming from the way he'd touched me before finally forcing himself to leave my quarters at 2 a.m. Hello? Miss Rodriguez? An unfamiliar voice, professional and cold. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Organized Crime Division. I need to speak with you about your employer, Dominic Castellano. Ice flooded my veins. What? We know you've been living at his estate for over a week. We know you have access to his home, his son, potentially his business dealings. We'd like to ask you some questions, voluntarily, of course. The threat beneath the word voluntarily was clear. I don't know anything about his business. Nevertheless, we'd appreciate your cooperation. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from the estate, Rosie's Cafe. Meet me there this afternoon at 2. Come alone. Don't tell Mr. Castellano about this call. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, phone trembling in my hand, the beautiful cocoon of denial I'd been building suddenly stripped away. The police wanted me to inform on Dominic. They wanted me to betray the man whose home I lived in, whose son I cared for, whose kiss still burned on my lips. The man who'd saved my brother, the man who was undeniably a criminal. I was still sitting there, frozen with indecision, when my door opened and Dominic walked in without knocking. He took one look at my face and his expression hardened. What happened? I should have lied. Should have kept the detective's call secret like she'd ordered. But Dominic had been right last night. I adapted to survive, and in this moment, my instincts screamed that lying to him would be far more dangerous than telling the truth. The police called, I said. Organized crime division. They want me to meet them, to talk about you. The silence that followed was terrifying. Dominic's face went blank, that professional mask sliding into place. But I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Did you agree? She didn't give me a chance to answer before hanging up. Good. He moved closer, sitting on the edge of my bed with predatory grace. This is important, Elena. What I'm about to tell you, you can never repeat. Not to the police, not to anyone. Do you understand? I nodded, my mouth dry. You're going to go to that meeting. You're going to tell Detective Morrison that you're just a nanny, that you know nothing about my business, that you've seen nothing suspicious. You'll be nervous, that's expected, but you won't give them anything they can use. And if they threaten me, if they say they'll take Miguel away, or they can't touch Miguel. His care is handled through legal trusts they can't break, and they can't threaten you without revealing they have nothing. This is a fishing expedition, Elena. They're hoping you'll panic and give them something, anything they can use against me. I stared at him, at the complete certainty in his eyes, the absolute control even in this situation. Have you done this before? Coached people on how to lie to the police? Yes. No hesitation, no shame. Many times, because in my world, loyalty is currency, and right now, I need to know. Are you loyal to me, Elena, or are you going to fold under the first sign of pressure? It was a test. Everything was always a test with him. And the terrifying part was, I already knew my answer. I'm loyal, I said quietly. To you, to Luca, to this family. Something blazed in his eyes. Triumph, possession, hunger. Say it again. I'm loyal to you. He pulled me against him, his hand tangling in my hair. You have no idea what you've just done, he murmured against my neck. What you've just agreed to, but I'll make sure you never regret it. His mouth found mine in a kiss that was both promise and claiming. And I kissed him back with the fervor of someone who'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. At 2 p.m., I walked into Rosie's cafe alone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Detective Morrison was easy to spot, mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of tired that came from years of dealing with criminals and corruption. Miss Rodriguez, thank you for coming. She gestured to the seat across from her. Can I get you anything? No, thank you. I sat, keeping my hands visible on the table like Dominic had instructed. Nervous, but not defensive. Confused, but cooperative. I'll get right to it. How did you come to work for Dominic Castellano? I told her the story. Luca's meltdown in the restaurant, my background with my brother, the job offer. All true, all verifiable. And in the time you've been living at his estate, have you noticed anything unusual? Late-night visitors? Suspicious phone calls? Large amounts of cash? I take care of his son, I said carefully. I don't involve myself in Mr. Castellano's business affairs. I know he's wealthy and has security, but beyond that... I shrugged, letting the implication hang, that I was too focused on childcare to notice anything else. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Miss Rodriguez, do you understand who you're working for? The man is suspected in at least a dozen murders. Money laundering, racketeering, extortion. He's dangerous. He's been nothing but professional with me, I said, which was technically true if you ignored the kissing. And his son needs specialized care. That's my only concern. Is it? Morrison leaned forward. Or are you being coerced? Because if you're afraid, if he's threatened you or your brother, we can protect you. The concern in her voice sounded genuine, and for a moment, I almost believed her, but Dominic's words echoed in my mind. They have nothing. This is desperation. I'm not being coerced, I said firmly. I'm grateful for the opportunity to help a child who needs support. That's all. Morrison studied me for a long moment, then slid a business card across the table. When you change your mind, and you will, they always do, call me. Day or night, before it's too late. I took the card, tucked it in my pocket, and left. The walk back to the estate felt endless. Every step was weighted with the knowledge of what I'd just done. Lied to a police detective to protect a man I'd known for barely more than a week. A man who was undoubtedly guilty of the crimes Morrison had listed and probably worse. But when I walked through the front door and heard Luca's laugh echoing from the living room, when I saw Dominic standing there with his son, both of them looking at me like I was exactly where I belonged, I knew I'd made my choice. I'd chosen them. This family. This dangerous, impossible situation. And there was no going back. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Intense, surreal, and impossible to shake. My days belonged to Luca, helping him navigate a world that wasn't built for minds like his. We developed routines that worked, discovered his love for astronomy, and celebrated the small victories like using more words or trying a new food without anxiety. My nights belonged to Dominic, stolen hours after Luca slept, when the dangerous crime boss became just a man desperate for connection, for touch, for someone who saw past the armor. But the world outside our bubble was growing restless. It started with small things, cars that seemed to follow us during trips to Luca's therapy appointments, Marcus reporting potential surveillance, phone calls that made Dominic's expression go dark and dangerous. He was protecting me from something, keeping information locked behind those calculated eyes. But I could feel the pressure building like a storm on the horizon. On a Tuesday afternoon, while Luca was at speech therapy, I visited Miguel at Riverside. The transformation in my brother was miraculous. He'd gained weight, his stimming seemed more joyful than anxious, and he'd started using his communication device more consistently. When I arrived, he was in the music therapy room, his hands moving across a keyboard with surprising grace. "Sister," he signed when he saw me, his smile genuine and bright. "Hi, brother. You look happy?" "Happy here. Good food. Nice people. Music." Watching him thrive made everything, the lies to the detective, the dangerous entanglement with Dominic, all of it, feel justified. This was why I'd stepped into that SUV. This was the price of Miguel's happiness, and I'd pay it 1,000 times over. But as I was leaving, I noticed a man in a dark sedan across the street, camera with a long lens pointed at the facility entrance. My blood ran cold. They were documenting my visits, building a case, connecting dots I'd tried so hard to keep separate. I called Dominic immediately. "They're watching Miguel's facility," I said without preamble, "taking photos. Get back here now." His voice was pure command. "Marcus is already on his way to you." The drive back to the estate was tense. Marcus's jaw was tight, his eyes constantly checking mirrors. And when we pulled through the gates, there were more security guards visible than usual. Men with hard eyes and visible weapons standing at strategic points around the property. Dominic met me at the door, his hands immediately cupping my face, checking me over like I might be injured. "You're okay?" "I'm fine. But Dominic, if they're watching Miguel, they're trying to pressure you, to make you feel exposed." He pulled me inside, his arm around my waist possessive and protective. "It won't work. I've already made calls. Riverside security is being upgraded and Miguel will have a personal protection detail for the foreseeable future." "A protection detail? He's 15 years old in a care facility. How do I explain that to him?" "You tell him the truth, that bad people sometimes try to hurt people we love and we're keeping him safe." Dominic's eyes were hard. "Welcome to my world, Elena. This is what I meant when I said once you're mine, the danger comes with it." Before I could respond, one of Dominic's men appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we have a situation. Luca's therapy center called. There was an incident during his session." Every ounce of color drained from Dominic's face. "What kind of incident?" "A man attempted to enter the private therapy wing. Said he was Luca's uncle. Wanted to observe the session. Security stopped him, but he became aggressive before leaving." "We have him on camera." Dominic was moving before the man finished speaking, pulling out his phone and barking orders in Italian. I followed him to his office where he pulled up security footage on his computer. The man on screen was in his 30s, dark hair, expensive suit, and when he turned toward the camera, I saw the cold calculation in his eyes. "Do you know him?" I asked. "Antonio Romano, Gabriella's brother." Dominic's voice was ice. "He's been trying to get access to Luca for months. Claims he wants a relationship with his nephew. What he really wants is leverage. Leverage for what?" Dominic looked at me, and I saw the struggle play across his face. Whether to keep me in the dark or pull me fully into the truth. Finally, he spoke. "Gabriella's family wants back in. When she left, when she signed away her parental rights, it damaged their alliance with my organization. They've been trying to rebuild the connection, and they see Luca as their way in. But Luca doesn't know them. He doesn't do well with strangers." "Exactly. Which is why they'll never get near him." The absolute certainty in his voice should have been comforting, but all I could think about was the escalation. Police surveillance, Romano family aggression, the walls closing in from multiple directions. "What if this doesn't stop?" I whispered. "What if they keep pushing?" Dominic pulled me against his chest, his hand stroking my hair with surprising gentleness. Then I pushed back harder. "This is what I do, Elena. I protect what's mine. And you and Luca? You're mine now. Completely." The possessiveness should have frightened me. Instead, I felt safe for the first time in years. That night, after Luca was asleep, Dominic called me to his office. When I entered, he was pouring whiskey, his movements tense. "We need to talk about contingencies," he said without preamble. "If things escalate further, if the police come with warrants or the Romanos make another move, what kind of contingencies?" He handed me a thick envelope. "Inside are documents, new identity paperwork for you and Miguel, bank account information with enough money to start over somewhere safe, and instructions for reaching my contacts, who can help you disappear if necessary." I stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. "You're planning for me to run?" "I'm planning for every scenario." He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I told you, I protect what's mine. If staying here puts you in danger, then you leave. But understand, Elena, I will find you again. Wherever you go, whatever name you use, I will always find you." It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a promise. "I don't want to run," I said quietly. "I want to stay. With you. With Luca. Even knowing the cost? Even understanding what you're choosing?" I thought about Miguel thriving at Riverside, Luca laughing during our constellation lessons, the way Dominic looked at me like I was something precious and irreplaceable. The family we'd built in the spaces between danger. "Especially knowing the cost," I said. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, before pulling back just enough to whisper against my lips, "Then we fight. Together." The breaking point came 2 days later. I was in the garden with Luca, helping him collect leaves for a science project, when Marcus appeared, his expression grim. "Miss Rodriguez. Inside. Now." The urgency in his tone made my blood freeze. I looked at Luca. "Can you keep collecting leaves? I'll be right back." "Okay, but come back fast. We need 20 more samples." "I promise." Inside, Dominic's office was filled with men, his security team, his advisors, all radiating tension. Dominic stood behind his desk, a laptop open in front of him, his expression darker than I'd ever seen. "Show her," he said quietly. One of the men turned the laptop toward me. On screen was a video, grainy security footage from outside Riverside, but it had been edited, spliced with footage of me entering and leaving Dominic's estate, overlaid with text that painted a narrative. Crime boss uses vulnerable children as cover. Nanny complicit in money laundering operation. "They're going to release this to the media," Dominic said. "Make you look like an accomplice, drag Miguel into the investigation, destroy everything we've built." Rage, pure and incandescent, flooded through me. "They're using my brother, using a disabled teenager as ammunition." "Yes." Dominic moved around the desk, his hands settling on my shoulders. "Which is why we're going to end this. Tonight." "How?" His smile was cold, dangerous, the expression of a predator about to strike. I'm going to give the Romanos exactly what they want. A meeting to discuss Luca. Antonio will come to the estate thinking he's won. What he doesn't know is that I have evidence of his own criminal activities. Trafficking, extortion, connections to groups that make my operations look charitable. Evidence I'm going to hand directly to Detective Morrison in exchange for her closing the investigation on me. I stared at him. You're going to make a deal with the police? But you said— I said I protect what's mine. His hands tightened on my shoulders. Morrison wants a win. I'll give her one. The Romano family, gift-wrapped. In exchange, she leaves us alone. All of us. Including Miguel. And if it doesn't work, if she won't deal, then I have contingency plans for the contingency plans. He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. But it will work. Because I don't lose Elena, especially not when it comes to my family. Your family, I echoed, the words feeling both foreign and right. Yes, my family. You, Luca, Miguel, you're mine now. And I take care of what's mine. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. Antonio Romano arrived exactly on time, flanked by his own security, his expression smug as Marcus led him to Dominic's office. I watched from the security monitors, my heart pounding, as Dominic offered him a drink and pleasantries before getting down to business. You want access to my son, Dominic said flatly. Why? He's my nephew. Family should know family. Luca doesn't know you, never has. His mother made her choice when she walked away. Antonio's smile was cold. Gabriella made a mistake, one we're willing to overlook if you're reasonable. Give us access to Luca. Let us be part of his life. In return, we can be valuable allies. Or, Dominic said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, you can back off permanently, and I won't send this to every federal agency in the tri-state area. He slid a folder across the desk. I couldn't see Antonio's expression as he opened it, but I saw the way his body went rigid, the way his hand clenched on the papers. This is fabricated. You can't prove— I can prove all of it. Dates, transactions, witnesses ready to testify. You've been sloppy, Antonio. Arrogant. You thought being Gabriella's brother protected you. It doesn't. You bastard! Antonio stood, his chair scraping violently. You think you can threaten me? My family will— Your family will cut you loose the moment this goes public. Dominic's voice was ice. They'll throw you to the wolves to save themselves. That's how this works. You know it. I know it. So here's what's going to happen. You walk away from Luca. Forever. You stop the surveillance, the media campaign, all of it. And in return, this stays sealed. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Finally, Antonio spoke. And if I refuse? Then Detective Morrison gets a very interesting package delivered to her desk tomorrow morning, and you spend the next 20 years in a federal prison. Your choice. Antonio's jaw worked, fury and calculation warring on his face. Finally, he threw the folder back on the desk. Fine. But this isn't over. Yes, Dominic said quietly. It is. After Antonio left, escorted by Marcus and 3 other guards to ensure he left the property, I found Dominic still in his office, staring at the folder of evidence. Is it really over? I asked from the doorway. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes was profound. The Romano situation is handled. Morrison already agreed to the deal. She gets their entire operation, and she closes the investigation on me. The surveillance stops. The media story dies. Miguel stays safe. I moved into the room, drawn to him like gravity. And us? Us. He pulled me onto his lap, his arms wrapping around me like he was afraid I might disappear. We stay. We build this family. We figure out how to navigate a world that doesn't understand us, but can't break us either. Dominic, I whispered, my hands cupping his face. I love you. The words had been building for weeks, terrifying and inevitable. His eyes closed, something like pain crossing his features. Don't, he said roughly. Don't love me, Elena. I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things. I'll do more terrible things to keep you and Luca safe. I know, I said. I love you anyway. Not despite what you are, but because of it. Because you'd burn down the world for your son. Because you saved my brother. Because you see me, really see me, and still want me. Want you? His laugh was harsh. I'm obsessed with you, possessed by you. You've become the thing I can't afford to lose, and that makes you my greatest weakness. Then we're even, I said, leaning down to kiss him. Because you've become mine. 3 months later, I stood in the garden watching Luca and Miguel together. Luca was showing Miguel his telescope, both boys communicating in their own unique blend of signs, words, and comfortable silence. They'd bonded over their shared love of patterns and routines, and watching them together made my heart feel too big for my chest. Dominic's arms wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. They're good together. They are. I leaned back against him, feeling safe and home in a way I'd never experienced before. I have something for you, he murmured, pulling a small box from his pocket. My heart stopped. Dominic. It's not what you think. Well, not yet. He opened the box to reveal a key. The deed to this house is now in both our names. You're not the nanny anymore, Elena. You're my partner. In everything. Tears blurred my vision. What does that mean exactly? It means your family, legally, officially, irrevocably. It means Miguel has a permanent home here when he's ready. It means Luca has the mother he deserves. And it means... He turned me in his arms, his expression vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. It means I'm asking you to stay. Not because you work for me or because of convenience, but because I love you, because I can't imagine a life without you in it. Yes, I breathed. Yes to all of it, to staying, to family, to building a life with you despite the danger and the darkness and everything that comes with it. He kissed me as the sun set behind us, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, I could hear Luca's laugh and Miguel's happy sounds. This family we'd built, unconventional, dangerous, perfect, was ours. I thought about the exhausted waitress I'd been 3 months ago, invisible and drowning. She would never have believed this ending was possible. But standing here, wrapped in Dominic's arms, watching our boys play together in a garden that was now mine too, I understood something profound. Sometimes salvation comes from the most dangerous places. Sometimes love grows in the spaces between darkness and light. Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you're born into. And sometimes, the man who kidnaps your heart is exactly the man you need to save your soul. We'd fought for this, bled for it, risked everything for it, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Come on, Dominic said, taking my hand. Let's go inside. I promised Luca we'd make pizza for dinner, and you know how he gets when routines are disrupted. I laughed, letting him lead me toward the house, toward the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of family. Behind us, the gates closed automatically, sealing us safely inside our own world. Whatever storms came next, we'd face them together, and that was enough.